Thank you. So welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. I'm Lucia Barcher, pronouns she, her, ella, and I am the Diversity Programming Board Chair, as well as coordinator for the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at RCC. And I would like to extend a warm welcome to my co-hosts, Sally Snyder, Assistant to the Vice President of Student Learning and Success, and a founding member of Courageous Conversations, along with our other co-host, friend of the college, Pastor Tom Berry of Bethany Presbyterian. And thank you so much for spending your lunch with us today. Just a couple of tech tips. Check your audio, make sure that the device is turned up on your device, or the volume, excuse me. And, just pop in the chat if there's any technical issues. Also, if you want to turn on closed captioning, they've moved around the dials in the new version of Zoom. So it might be under the More button, which is the 3 little dots. So you can go ahead and click that. You just click that button once. And also want to encourage you to locate your react button. We love to see your reactions, even if you have to have your camera off. And we are going to do a couple of interactive moments, as well as the chat if you want to chime in and let us know what you think or provide feedback. Sally's going to be keeping an eye on that. Yeah, look at that. Nice. Hi, Gabby, welcome. All right, so just a little Zoom etiquette. We're so glad you're here. A couple people already mentioned that they are spending their lunch break with us, and we really appreciate that. One note, we're kind of used to this by now, but please mute your microphone unless you are speaking. As well, if you need to move around or eat or do that Pilates during your lunch break, go ahead and turn the camera off. We don't want to make folks nauseous. And as well, use the react buttons to let us know and contribute to the conversation. Okay. Hello, Amy Durst, welcome.
Hello, friends.
Hey. So it is Native American History Month, and I just want to take a brief moment to mention that I am at the beautiful Redwood campus of Rowe Community College, and on behalf of RCC, I would like to take this moment to acknowledge that we are located within the ancestral homelands of the Shasta, Takelma, and Lagawa peoples who have lived here since time immemorial. We invite you to learn about the land you reside on by visiting this interactive map, and Sally's going to put the link to that in the chat, as well as our Rogue Report article for Native American History Month, which is an update on our Courageous Conversations from our program from last April about the developments on the Klamath River and after the removal of the dams. Some really promising news there. So we invite you to check that out. I think Sally was going to put that in the chat as well. And excuse me, our mission at Diversity Programming Board is to enrich, support, and celebrate our diverse community by acting as a catalyst for inclusion, continuous learning, understanding, and acceptance through active engagement and facilitation of educational opportunities that challenge biases and deepen conversations. So we're here to talk about conversation. We have some group agreements, which include trying to keep an open mind, listening to all points of view, respect, seeking to understand rather than to persuade or convert, curiosity, a big theme in our Common Read book, questioning old assumptions, looking for new insights.
Forward your frame, please. Sorry. It's still showing mission.
Oh, yes, that's okay. I'm where I
Oh,
need to be, thanks. And sincerity, speak only for yourself and about what has personal meaning to you, versus generalizing for other people. So what we're going to do today is we're going to look back for a spell to how we got here. We're going to talk a little bit about contributing factors to our polarization. We're going to talk about considerations when we are trying to engage and how, we can kind of proceed in those types of conversations. And then we're going to do a little curiosity practice. So Tom is here to help us with a technique used by the Three Practices organization. And so for those who want to participate, at the very end, we're going to be breaking into breakout rooms where we'll practice this intent or these curious conversations, and he'll kind of explain that deeper. But our framing question today, the idea is that we can practice this with sort of a low stakes topic. So our framing question today is, when we're using our mobile devices in a public setting, turn off your phone or put on your earbuds. So that's just kind of to give you an idea of what we're going to be talking about. So if you want to think about that, and if you have any strong thoughts or feelings about that, keep that in mind, but that'll be our framing question when we get to that point later on. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the elephant in the room. You might have heard there was an election a couple days ago. And while we're not here to talk about the election or to debate politics, I would like to acknowledge that elections tend to activate emotions and contribute to our polarization as a country. Some Americans were surprised by the election outcome, some were happy, some were upset. But recognizing all those experiences is a good start at getting a better understanding of where we go from here. So if you'll indulge us, Sally is going to help me by launching an anonymous Zoom poll, just checking in on how folks are feeling today. So you should get a pop-up on your screen that lets you choose from any category that feels applicable. And so we'll give just folks a moment to engage with that. And I appreciate you're sharing your feelings with us. Okay, so how do you share? Are you able to share the results, or can I? No.
are the participants able to see?
Yes. They're
Okay,
popped
so
up.
Oh, you were okay. I wasn't sure.
it might not show on your screen. So we have 2 people feeling content, 6 feeling concerned, 5 feeling fearful, 5 angry, 3 hopeful.
Yeah. So as you can see, just in this small Zoom space, we have a wide array of reactions, of feelings, of points of views, and some wise person in this room told me that if we're doing something right, then we should have people from all thoughts and ideologies showing up to our spaces, and we hope that that continues to be the case for our events and our conversations moving forward. So I really, really appreciate you taking a moment to just kind of acknowledge that we may all be feeling differently today. Okay, so let me reshare. Looks like we have a couple more people. Welcome. So this content is primarily based on concepts from our Common Read book. I never thought about it that way by Monica Guzman. Monica is a senior fellow for public practice at Braver Angels, which is a nonpartisan organization whose mission is bringing Americans together to bridge the partisan divide and strengthen our democratic republic. When we get to our more interactive part of our program, we'll be using some techniques from 3 practices, and Tom will let us know about that. They are a nonpartisan group focusing on human connection, curiosity, and challenging stereotypes. And we've talked before in other places about the Conversation Project from Oregon Humanities, which has some similar techniques about reflective conversations. And we're also inspired by the work being done at Lynn Benton Community College, the Civil Discourse program. They're doing some great work on their campuses with meaningful conversations. So Sally's going to be sharing some links in the chat if people want to kind of dig a little deeper. Conversation Project does have, and Braver Angels has ongoing, and 3 practices actually, has ongoing events and Zoom events online constantly. So you can kind of go on their website and check it out and sign up. And so, yeah, we'll hope you check those out. So the name of our program today is Can We Talk? But I think what we really mean is, can we talk? Have we lost the skill for civil discourse? And what does civil discourse even mean? According to Ohio State University's Center for Ethics and Human Values, civil discourse is the practice of deliberating about matters of public concern in a way that seeks to expand knowledge and promote understanding. The word civil doesn't refer to civility in the sense of mere politeness, but to civic in the sense of being oriented to public life. Civil discourse aims to develop mutual respect, build civic trust, and identify common ground on matters of public concern. Our topic today is less about debate and more about interpersonal communication, but the way we engage has changed dramatically in the last 30 years as we're increasingly communicating through devices or electronic platform. Also, the way we get our news and information has significantly changed. We'll get into that more in a bit. But in some ways, even our attempts at interpersonal communication sometimes fall into or turn into failed attempts at civil discourse thanks to social media. I was one of those people in the confession time. I was one of those people in the early days of Facebook that was going to change the world with a well-crafted post. Like I was going to change hearts and minds with my beautifully worded post. Obviously, we know that is not a thing, but that is one of those concepts with communication that like it's not, you're not building relationships when you're just like doing a mic drop on social media, right? So one of our current challenges with communication is how lightning fast information travels globally these days. And it can be beneficial, for example, during a natural disaster, but in other situations, it can create a warped sense of urgency and result in reporting errors or misinformation to be spread. For example, in the days before cable broadcasting, the term breaking news was often used to indicate that there was something so urgent it warranted interrupting a regularly scheduled program for a news report. But now that term is used for almost any new piece of information that is new, but not necessarily urgent. And we have access to so much information that now even the idea of what is newsworthy has changed. So before we dive in, it's good to look back at how we got here. So how did we become so polarized? There's not one easy answer. But in the 20th century, there were some legislative and technological factors that really affected how we communicate and how we consume information. So in the United States, our founding fathers felt that freedom of speech and freedom of the press was so crucial to a healthy democracy that they put it in the Constitution. The general idea being that the First Amendment prevents the government from censoring the press. As with many of our rights, the guidepost of what can be considered free speech and what constitutes the press in the age of social media is evolving over time due to new technology and court challenges. When broadcast news came on the scene in the golden age of radio, for younger attendees, that's what they used to call podcasts in that era. During the 1930s and 40s, the US government created the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, with the mission to encourage the larger and more effective use of radio in the public interest and a mandate to promote a basic standard of fairness in broadcasting. So in that era, there were only 3 broadcast radio networks: NBC, ABC, and CBS. So the Federal Communications Act of 1934 included the Fairness Doctrine, which required networks to devote airtime to fair and balanced coverage of controversial issues that were of public interest, and that candidates for public office were entitled to equal airtime. So that's kind of where that concept of equal time comes in, which most networks still honor. The FCC also prohibits the broadcasting of false information that causes substantial public harm. So this kind of went on for decades, but eventually in 1987, the Fairness Doctrine was repealed after several court challenges when the FCC decided it had a chilling effect on freedom of speech. That coincided with the increasing popularity of cable news, and now networks are trying to fill many more hours of airtime, and content began to evolve from hard news to what later became categorized as infotainment. So fast forward to present day, there's really not legislation like the Fairness Doctrine that applies to the internet and social media with regard to truth in reporting or misinformation, though we know it's a huge problem that affected our election process in the past. And in fact, one of the first major cases was heard at the Supreme Court this year regarding misinformation online around the COVID pandemic, which hinges on the intersection of free speech, harmful misinformation on social media, and state government's ability to mitigate those harms for public safety. The other major thing that happened that really contributed to polarization at the government level had to do with the concept of our lawmakers reaching across the aisle to collaborate and compromise on legislation on some common ground for the greater public interest. But in the mid-1990s, there was a major emphasis put on election fundraising, so much so that the standard work week for Congress was changed from 5 days to 3 in order to allow representatives to spend more time in their home districts doing campaign fundraising. So prior to this, most lawmakers had homes in Washington, and their families often socialized on weekends and therefore built stronger relationships across the aisle, which made it easier to arrive at compromises with legislation. So if it feels like Congress is less productive these days, it's true. Because it's harder for those compromises to happen. One of the side effects of that change was that the number of bills enacted by Congress has significantly dropped in the last decades. So in 1977, the 95th Congress enacted a total of 804 pieces of legislation. In comparison, the 117th Congress enacted a total of 365 bills between 2021 and 2022. So that's pretty dramatic there. Okay, so we talked about the press and the government, but what about us? In what ways have our interpersonal communications broken down? What are some challenges preventing us from making more human connection? Monica Guzman uses the acronym SOS to help explain. So The first concept is sorting. So psychologically, as human beings, we prefer to be around people who are like us, who share things in common with us, who validate our experiences. This is that concept of being around like-minded people, right? We can let our guard down. On the contrary, we have othering. This is a pattern to push away those who disagree with us or have different ideologies and therefore are less relatable or less welcome. And lastly, we have siloing, which is how the more time we spend with our in-groups, the more entrenched we become in our narratives and beliefs, and as a result, are less likely to engage in bridging conversations. Siloing causes harm because it reinforces our assumptions on a particular topic or stereotypes about people or groups. So social media algorithms have really taken silos to an extreme level because it basically they operate on that concept. And so if you like something, you get more of that. And so that has caused a lot of problems with people actually just communicating and then understanding if the information they're getting is accurate. One thing that I think is interesting, I follow a lot of sort of television type content, is the idea of like, have you ever gone to an Airbnb or stayed at a friend's house and looked at their Netflix and you're like, I don't know any of these shows. Like what, or like swapping phones with someone you trust and going through their social media feed. Like I do this with my teenager and I'm like, because we always joke we're on a different side of the internet. That can really be an eye opener when you're sort of trying to get an idea of how entrenched we start to get with, especially with social media. So when we say bridging, we mean just that, building bridges through conversation and creating human connections. So there's two ideas that play a big role in those types of conversations. One is curiosity, which is a big theme I never thought of it that way. Why do we say stay curious in conversation? Because when we remain in our silos, we're relying on assumptions and often inaccurate narratives and not recognizing gaps in our knowledge. We rely on a lot of binary categories in our world: good, bad, red, blue, conservative, liberal. But we all know that life is messy and human relationships have a lot of gray areas. Many of us don't fall into either one of those labels. That said, it's a big challenge in the age of information to stay curious. And those of us who were around before the internet remember agonizing moments when you were trying to remember the name of that one actor who was in that movie with that one other actor and not being able to Google it. You just had to go to bed just not knowing that thing. And so having access to all that information sort of gives us a false sense of security in our knowledge. Like, no, I know it's true. I saw it on Google or whatever. So that's something that I would argue is one of our biggest challenges right now. The other concept that plays a big role is trust, and understanding that not all people necessarily want to engage in civil discourse or curious conversations. Sometimes we know that there's trolls online or people who are not wanting to engage in good faith. So that's an important distinction. But when you do find someone that you want to connect with and you're able to have conversations with what we call healthy friction, right? You don't agree on every single thing. It builds trust. But that takes practice. So with that, I am going to pass the mic to our dear friend Tom. I'm gonna stop share.
And I'm going to remember to unmute myself. Um, and I'm going to ask Sally and Lucia really quick. We had talked in prep with this. I think breaking into two groups would be fine, or I am more than happy if we want to all stay in one. This is still a manageable group, and we're still doing just kind of a, a little bit of a flavor of it. So we could stay in one whole group if we want to
I
as
say
well.
let's stay in one room.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to apologize in advance because I could get talking about this all the time and just go on, and I'm not going to do that. But I
No,
do
we're
want
good.
to.
We're good on time. So
Okay. Well,
take it away.
okay. So three practices is it is by no means the only way to have some kind of discourse and talk about things that are that might be hard to talk about. But it is a way of doing it that I discovered a number of years back and have been trained in and really appreciate what it brings. So I put the link in the chat. Um, if you want to go check that out, there's so much more to it than what we're going to find out about today. So again, this is like a tease and an invite and all that. Um, this started, it came together in 2016. When there was a lot a lot going on that was dividing folks and things like that. And the idea, the two Jim and Jim who put this together, um, they're kind of what started this was, what do you do when you're sitting at Thanksgiving possibly and Uncle Fred says something just so outrageous that you're not sure whether you should run out of the room screaming or you should poke him in the eye with your fork, or what do you do when you are so triggered by something like that? And this is a way, they call it the practices, and there's three of them, and I will get to that. But this really is a way of it's a workout is what we call it, and it is a way to work on and create that muscle mass of how can you respond um, in ways you might need to leave, and that's okay too. But if you're going to stay and respond, how do you respond in ways that are that might work better than just freaking out? So I'm going to go through. There's a script. This really is. People are trained to do this. There's a script how it works. There is a process that some folks know very well, and other folks, if you're just joining in to one of these, it takes a little while to learn. You are going to get today kind of a brief version of that. And then again, I encourage you, and I'd be happy to talk afterwards more about this, but I encourage you to check out three practices. So starting what we would start pretty much in any normal three practice event would be with the script. So the three practices are: I'll be unusually interested in others, I'll stay in the room with difference, and I'll stop comparing my best with your worst. So again, those three are: I'll be unusually interested in others, I'll stay in the room with difference, and I'll stop comparing my best with your worst. Agreement is not one of the practices. What we are looking for is clarity about what others think and feel and want. Three practice circles help us find our own voices by learning to listen with genuine curiosity to the voices of the others whose ideas, beliefs, and lived experiences may be different from ours. This is not a discussion, it's not a debate. It's a workout that prepares us to hear things we might miss in the real world. You can relax. No one will call on you. We won't go around the circle or take polls. You decide if and when you want to speak. You can ask any question you like. You may or may not get the answer you want. If someone asks a question you're not ready to answer, it's fine to say you want to give it some more thought. If you do take a minute, and we'll be talking about that in just a minute, if you do take a minute to share, no one will interrupt you because we're here to practice listening with genuine curiosity to what people say, even if we don't like it. So, our framing question for this circle is: in public places, turn off your phone or turn on your earbuds. Anyone can take, normally we do 2 minutes on a real three practices, but we're going to do one because of our time frame today. So, anyone can take a minute to respond to that frame with an opinion, a belief, or story, whatever fits. There is no right answer on how you respond to that. And then following that, anyone else may ask a clarifying question. Now, a clarifying question begins with this phrase: I'd be curious to know. And we're sticklers on that. If you don't start with it, I will stop you and make you start with it. So every clarifying question starts with, I would be curious to know. The primary skill we'll work on is learning to ask questions that are genuinely curious and get to the point in as few words as possible. It is fair play to ask a question like, I'd be curious to know, how do you think that sounds to a woman, or a person of color, or an immigrant, or a conservative, or a liberal, whatever fits, as long as it's genuinely curious and it gets to the point. Following that clarifying question, the volunteer who originally spoke has 1 minute. They usually don't need that much, but has 1 minute to respond. So as the ref, and that's my job, and every circle actually has 2 refs, but as a ref, I'm here to help you work through that process. I also have a timer. I'm only going to use it for that first initial minute when someone's sharing. And the timer it's not about power or control. It's about fair play. It's a way that we keep things moving, but also we let people know what's expected and how much time they have. Usually we time the questions as well, but that's not, again, this is kind of a taste, and we're kind of doing a shorter version of it. So I will do that kind of as we go. So this really is basically the way this works is whoever would like to volunteer, and this is where Lucia and Sally can help me out. You can either raise your hand or use the raising of the hand um, uh, little thing down there, whatever you call that now. But someone gets to volunteer and can talk whatever they want to say for a minute in public places. Turn off your phone or turn on your earbuds. And then if anyone wants to ask that clarifying question, put your hand up and I will work my best way to get through, and we will do those as we go. So first of all, does that make sense? Does anyone have any question about the process that we're heading into? Okay. Would anyone like to be the first person to take a minute to talk about in public places, turn off your phone or turn on your earbuds?
The instructor in me is going to participate first to encourage
Okay.
others. Hello, my name is Maricela Mendoza, and I used to be a stickler about this. It would really bother me to hear somebody having a conversation in public. It's the same as when you're at the library and people are now using their inside voice and not their library voice. And so I think the same thing is happening. Our expectations around using the phone in public have changed. And so it is now more acceptable than when phones first came out to take a call in public. I would still say that use your earbuds because it reminds me of a Curb Your Enthusiasm episode that I show in class. I teach sociology, so we get to talk about social norms and breaking them. And it's Larry David, and he's really irritated by this guy who's talking on the phone. And he says, it's very annoying because you cannot hear what the other person's talking about. You know, I'm not going to tell you what the whole episode is, but that's what he, after lecturing this guy, comes up with. He's like, it's just annoying. And so we are missing another part of the conversation. So it can be a little distracting to just hear one person. And so, yeah, earbuds on is what I.
Maricela, thank you very much. I appreciate you sharing. And like I said, normally if you go to one of these, you get 2 minutes. So I feel like I'm being mean by jumping in too soon, but that's part of the practice. We give people the time, and then we jump in. In the larger script, we have a piece we say. When I say thank you, that means 2 things. One, it means thank you for sharing, and 2, it means stop talking. So I should probably share that. If I start saying thank you, then you know what I'm doing. But would anyone like to ask Maricela a clarifying question? Lucia, is that your hand up? Okay.
Maricela, I'd be curious to know if you think that the pushback on somebody using their earbuds in public should be up to the fellow citizens in the area, or the sort of whatever the setting is, like airline employees or those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. The context is very important. And Tom, do I have a minute? It seems
You
like
have a minute, yeah, give or take, and I'll jump in. I won't flash the thing for the whole time, but go ahead. Yes, you have a minute.
the context is very important. So, yeah, if you're at the airport, go for it. You know, talk all you want. Speaker without earbuds, you have to make arrangements to get picked up. You're going somewhere, things are happening. So to answer your question, Lucia, it all depends on the social context.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to ask a clarifying question? Is that, it says Tracy and Chris, so.
Hi, I'm Tracy, and I've got Chris over here.
Okay.
Maricela, I would be curious to know why you think people are speaking louder in libraries these days, because I've noticed that too. And I'm not sure how I feel about it.
Thanks.
Hi, Tracy and Chris. Thank you for your question. The activities in libraries have changed. And so now we're using our libraries for more than just sitting in front of a quiet book. We use our libraries to connect with other people, to use the internet. Not everybody has Wi-Fi. And I've also noticed this as a mother with young children. I go to the children's section. Children are in there playing video games. And so this is also a safe space for some children that don't have activities at home, or maybe a parent at home, or they're unsupervised. And so they're going to hang out with their friends at the library. And I actually had a conversation with the librarian because I was wondering why the voices were so loud. And so I asked about this, and he was very nice. The gentleman here at Talent Public Library said, because a lot of these children would be somewhere else, and this is a safe place for them. And once I heard that, I felt better. My girls now had an explanation as to why we were the only ones using library voices, and we had a better understanding. And thank you for your question. Yes, I think my minute is up.
You're fine. That was great. Thank you. Thank you both. Anyone else like to ask a clarifying question? Tracy and Chris, was that hand up from before? Or is that oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah, I just I'm working on another project here, but this caught my attention. I was at a major city library.
You have to start out with
you have
to start out with I'd be curious to know, and frame it as a question.
Okay, I'd be curious to know why, when I was at a major city library, which will remain anonymous at this time, about a week ago, ready to make a presentation, when I approached the staff at the main desk, they started using their not indoor voices, but their outside voices. And I was astounded. It was so much so that I texted Tracy. And they spoke to me in a way that I thought was like really not unlike anything I'd ever heard of in a library before. And I thought, wow, that's weird. So I went and sat down and waited for the person I was going to be meeting. They are in their mid-70s, so they're not a young person. A privileged white male. And I'm almost done. Thank you.
Okay.
And he used his outside voice when he saw me and started talking at a full volume. And I just was stunned. And I just never seen anything like it before. Thank you.
Okay. But so here, this is part of the piece, and I don't mean to be disrespectful or rude. That wasn't what I was trying to do. But the question is, so I'd be curious to know, are you asking Maricela, you'd be curious to know if she's experienced people using outdoor voices, or what was the frame or the gist of the question?
I would be curious to know why that's going on.
Gotcha. Okay. Marcel, does that work for you?
Yes. And
Okay.
thank you, Tracy, for giving another example. I feel like, wow, this discussion about library and voices can really get stretched. So again, I'm going to go back to my experience, and I'm just thinking I need to have some empirical research to back up what I'm talking about. That's just kind of the social scientist in me. But again, I'm thinking that the spaces are changing. We're using them for different purposes. I know here in the Valley we have, well, like in a lot of cities across the United States, we have a larger unhoused population, and so the unhoused are also using the library. Just for a variety of reasons. I'm sure I haven't given them a survey, but for the same reasons that anybody else who has a home or doesn't, to use the internet, to be somewhere comfortable, to be somewhere quiet. So I'm just going to go back to this idea that our activities in the library, in this place that used to be based on one or two activities of going to that place with the cards and finding a book, it's now a space to do other behaviors, and those behaviors are now more acceptable than they were in the past. And these behaviors happen to be a little a little noisier.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else have a clarifying question? And while you're thinking about it, one of the things that Three Practices does as well is it embraces quiet times and gaps, giving people the opportunity to form those questions and to think about it. And it also helps control people like me who just love to talk and love to jump in and love to share and share and share, giving other folks an opportunity. So we do purposely kind of sit in our silence while people get a chance to think about what they may want to ask.
And we've got Jim with his hand up.
Jim, thank you. I didn't see that. Thank you. Jim.
So I'm curious to know, just overall, if using a headset is still appropriate, because if you're listening to things and not talking out loud, you're quiet. But if you're in the middle of the airport, standing in the middle of the crowd, blocking the crowd, do you think people would approve of it? Otherwise, get off your phone and get out of the way. So emotions, would that be something that could also be part of it? It's you're not being considerate of others behind you. So I'd be just curious if that's part of our why we would want them to put their headset on, or just if there's other aspects to it.
Thank you, Jim. So Maricela, right back at you.
Jim, thanks for your question. The first thing I thought of was an experience I had where I was very irritated by somebody on even on their earbuds, because of what you mentioned, this lack of awareness of others. Where if you have to, let's say you're trying to move through the space and someone's on the phone and really not connected with what's going on in that moment, then suddenly you have someone who is like in their mind, so in some other world floating away, and you're thinking, I need to get past this person because I need to be somewhere. So I don't know how to answer your question other than to express that I also have those irritations. I have those same experiences of feeling irritated and feeling that people should be a little bit more aware of others, because we're all here together in whatever space that is. You're not alone. And so other people might be relying on you to act or behave a certain way to keep things running smoothly. So I am with you on that.
Thank you. I think we have time, and we may have to cut it out a little bit, but would anyone else like to go ahead and take that minute and share their thought on this particular question? Gabby.
Sure. I've really appreciated this conversation because I tend to not like earbuds, partly because I can't always see them. And so I like the indication that someone is actually on the phone And so I do that. So I don't ever use earbuds. And so it's just really interesting to hear different perspectives that I just never thought about. Yeah. So I actually don't have any more to say. Just that's what I tend to do, and I appreciate getting to hear a different way to do it, and the reason why that really is meaningful.
Does anyone have a clarifying question for Gabby? Sally?
And unmute myself. Let's see if I can remember my question. So I'd be curious to know if A, you are on speakerphone or not. And then like if you're in a restaurant, do you stay at the table or what do you do?
Those are great questions. Let's see, definitely not on speakerphone, because I kind of feel like that isn't very respectful to the person on the other side. It's a phone call to me, and I don't tend to answer the phone when I'm like with other people in person. Like if I'm in transit, or if I'm on my own, or if I'm shopping and I'm on my own, maybe I'll be on my phone, though I don't tend to be. So if I'm like in a person situation, I would probably separate myself to be on the phone, because I don't know, that feels a little odd to me personally, to be face to face and have essentially a private conversation with somebody else, even if it doesn't need to be private, because I'm not putting on speaker or anything.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a clarifying question for Gabby? Maricela?
Hi, I like how we passed the baton to you, Gabby. Gabby, I'm curious to know if you could remember when you first began to use a phone in public.
Oh, that's such a great question. I must have been in my 20s. I don't really like my phone very much, so I don't tend to have it out or use it. Like, I'm not a phone talker with people. And so it's also hard for me to think about, like, I don't do long conversations necessarily on the phone, but I must have been around 25 when cell phones were a bit more common. It's a great question, right? I don't even know if that was a great answer, but I wish I could ask you. I'd be curious to know what you were thinking with that.
But then the ref would jump in and say, you can't do that. So,
Bummer. Okay, Tom, fine.
okay. I think, Natalie, is that a hand up?
Yes. So, Gabby, I'd be curious to know if you had ever experienced a time when you were trying to use the headset to your ear and had difficulty hearing. And I speak from a personal experience. I don't hear well, and especially when I have just the headset to my ear. So having a headset on, or earbuds, or on speaker, for whatever reason, I can hear better when I'm using those methods versus a headset to my ear. I'd be curious to know if you'd ever either experienced that or had thought about that for others.
Yeah, my mom has to do that. And so I don't tend to have I don't feel any reactions when other people do it differently necessarily. I'm having a hard time like tracking my last big reaction on a phone thing. It just kind of influences what I end up doing, so I don't mind necessarily other people doing it, but every now and then I might be like, oh, are you talking to me? Oh, no, you're not talking to me. And so that's the only background I have for why I keep choosing to use my headset. But yeah, that's a very common one I have heard. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I can relate.
So I want to, like I said, this is, these circles can go on for an hour and a half, sometimes longer, and we're definitely keeping it short and to the point. But I did want to say a couple of quick things, and I also wanted to end the circle the way we end them every circle. But so I hope that you got to experience maybe something a little bit different, or at least got enough of a taste that you might go online and check this out. Um, just, as Marcella, as you said, all of a sudden, wow, I didn't know there was so much passion around the library. But think if you were talking about politics, or if you were talking about racism, or if you were talking about all sorts of different things. That's where it grew out of. It grew out of a spot to actually create a spot to put people with different opinions in a place that was slightly to very uncomfortable, and then figure out how to talk about it. It's grown. There are groups now that do storytelling, but it's the same piece. You still ask those "I'd be curious to know" questions, because again, we're working on that ability to not just tell our own story in the middle of somebody else's story, but to actually be unusually interested in them and listen to what they have to say when it's their turn. I do one that I've been doing for over 2 years now, and it's coming up next Monday. I'm wondering if it's going to be bigger than usual, because it's just called "Are You Okay?" And people check in and they have 2 minutes to share if they're okay or not. And then people listen to them and ask those clarifying questions. In a true situation for three practices, you actually get a follow-up. So if that sparks a little bit more, and the responses I get from that one especially are people just appreciate being heard, and having a chance to share. So again, those are all these different. It's much bigger than what we did today, but again, I hope you got an idea of. Sometimes it's hard to frame a question, and that's why we use the timer. We use it for the question part too, because I think we've all been in that spot where we're trying to figure out what we want to say, so we just keep kind of talking, and or we're uncomfortable if someone asks a question that we don't understand, so we don't ask them to clarify. And those are all good things too. So at the end of a three practice circle, we have a thank you time. And we just let people take unmute themselves, and thank people. So that may be thanking folks for the questions they asked, or that may be um, what I would do if this was a real circle, which I guess it technically is. But first, I'd say, Marcella, thank you for being the first one, and getting the ball rolling. I appreciate that. So if anyone else would like to thank either the people that shared or the people that asked questions, this would be a time to do it.
Yes, I would like to thank Marisela, and for just your courage for diving in and help getting the conversation started. And yeah, thank you, Tom, for leading us.
I wanted to thank all the folks who asked questions, because especially if this is brand new, sometimes that's just trying to figure out what the rules are. So thank you for being curious, and thank you for asking.
Okay, so we are getting to the end of our time together. That does go really fast when you when you start with. I have been a part of the Are You Okay three practices, and I found it very interesting and unexpected. So thank you for that, Tom. And you can sign up for their mailing list, and so they'll email you like the list of the upcoming events as well. So just to wrap up, a couple things I wanted to share. Let's see here. Share my screen. So resources, Sally put these links in the chat. Once again, three practices, Braver Angels, and Conversation Project, but y'all can always reach out to me if you want any more information, or if you didn't get a chance to grab those links. Feel free to reach out. I want to end with this quote, because I really think that it gives us a lot to think about, and I would like to sort of give us something to take away with us today. A lot of times when we get into arguments or debates and things online, especially, people kind of rely on that agree to disagree thing. And the concept with that, you know, it is fine because it can sort of potentially end things in a civilized way on the surface. But the concept is, you know, agree to disagree is okay for, you know, earbuds or speakerphone or pizza, pepperoni pizza or Hawaiian pizza, those kinds of things. But when it comes to, excuse me, issues like racism, sexism, those kinds of things, words matter, and words can also lead to actions that can be harmful to marginalized groups. And so I wanted to leave y'all with this to just kind of continue thinking about when you're having those arguments, to think about where your disagreement is coming from, and where is that rooted, and, you know, that might change the way that you leave a conversation. This quote, I've been misattributing it to James Baldwin for years, and I just learned that it actually, that's one of those online misinformation things that we were just talking about. I just learned it actually was said by Robert Jones Jr., who's an essayist and novelist. Yeah, so. And lastly, we would love to hear from you and let you know what you thought of our program. I'm actually gonna stop. Well, I have the actual link, which I can put in the chat, but I'll let those of you who like to use their devices use that, or use the QR code instead. I will quickly drop that link in the chat. It really helps us to make our programming better and just learn about any other ideas you might have. So thank you all for coming today. Thank you for engaging with us, and we hope to see you again at our next Courageous Conversation.
Stay curious, everyone.
Stay curious.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lucia.
You're welcome.